Welcome to another deep dive, this time into a question that I think really gets to the heart of how our economy works. Can money, the lifeblood of this system, can it really thrive in a free market?
Oh, absolutely. It's a question that forces us to, challenge a lot of assumptions about the role of government and, how we organize our lives.
Absolutely. And to guide us on this journey, we're turning to a classic, Murray Rothbard's What Has Government Done to Our Money? You familiar with this one?
Oh, yeah, it's a favorite. This book has really shaken things up. A lot of people, started looking at money, monetary policy in a whole new light, and it's prompted people to, stop just accepting what institutions like the Fed tell us.
Absolutely. It is a powerful call to think critically, right?
Mm-hmm.
To really examine the systems that shape our financial world.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, where do we start? Well, Rothbard takes us back to the basics, right? Very origins of money. Now, we've all heard about the barter system, right? Trading a cow for a cartload of wheat.
Right, but imagine trying to pay your rent with a portion of a plow,
Mhm.
or try to picture an economics professor, walking around to find someone who wants a lecture in exchange for eggs.
Yeah, not exactly efficient.
Exactly. I mean, barter, it reveals its limitations pretty quickly, especially the problem of indivisibility.
Indivisibility,
Yeah,
okay.
how do you divide a plow, right? To pay for a haircut or a loaf of bread or a new pair of shoes.
It's like a puzzle where the pieces don't fit. And then there's the whole issue of finding someone who not only wants what you have, but also has what you want.
Right.
The double coincidence of wants.
Precisely. And that can be, it can be really difficult to achieve, especially as societies become more complex and specialized.
So how do we overcome these challenges?
Well, that's where the ingenuity of the market comes in, right?
Yeah.
Enter indirect exchange. You start trading your product, not directly for something you need right now, but for something more marketable, something more easily traded, divisible.
Not all liquid. Okay, so instead of trying to trade that plow for eggs, you trade it for something like salt or silver, something that's in higher demand and can be broken down into smaller units.
Exactly. Salt actually throughout history has been a great example. It's durable, it's divisible, and, practically everyone needs it.
So it becomes like a proto-money.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's really the key insight here. Money, it isn't something that the government's invented. It emerges organically, right?
Mhm.
It's the needs and choices of individuals in the marketplace.
It's fascinating to think that all sorts of things have been used as money throughout history. Tobacco, cattle. I think you even mentioned fish hooks earlier.
Fish hooks.
Fish hooks. What were they buying with those? Tiny sweaters for goldfish.
Sounds strange, but it highlights a crucial point, right? What becomes money isn't arbitrary. It's a result of market forces, of people choosing what works best for them based on the qualities of the goods themselves.
Right. And over time, certain commodities rise to the top, right, proving to be the most marketable, the most widely accepted.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to the champions of the free market for money, right? Gold and silver.
Yes.
Ah, the classics, precious metals. But why did they win out? It's not just because they're shiny, right?
Well, shiny helps.
I mean, it does.
But what really sets gold and silver apart is their unique combination of characteristics. They're durable, so they don't rust or decay easily. They're highly divisible. You can, melt them down and create coins of varying denominations. And importantly, they've always been in high demand for ornaments and other decorative purposes. So that inherent demand gives them an extra edge in marketability.
So it's not just about their practicality as a medium of exchange, but also their intrinsic value as precious metals.
Exactly. And it's important to note that, in a truly free market, the specific choice of money, whether it's gold or silver or some other commodity, it's ultimately up to the market, right? Not to any government decree.
So it's the collective wisdom of the market, the choices of millions of individuals that determines what emerges as money.
Exactly.
Now, I'm curious about silver, though.
Yeah.
Is it being pushed out by gold?
Not entirely. While gold is often preferred for larger transactions, think of it as, like the $100 bill of the commodity world. Silver remains useful for smaller exchanges, more like your $5 bills.
So they each have their own niche.
Precisely. And this brings us to another important point that Rothbard emphasizes. Money, at its core, is a commodity, right? Just like any other good or service on the market. It's subject to the laws of supply and demand, just like wheat or oil or fish hooks.
Which is a crucial concept to grasp because it challenges the notion that money is somehow special or magical, that
Yeah.
it's created by, governments or central banks out of thin air.
Exactly. And this understanding is fundamental to unraveling, the complexities of monetary policy and the true nature of inflation. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of government intervention, Rothbard tackles some common misconceptions about money, like the idea that coins, because they look official, are somehow more real money than gold nuggets or bars.
Right. As if the shape or name stamped on a piece of metal magically transforms it into money.
Right.
Okay.
Rothbard clarifies that coinage in a free market is simply a business like any other. Think of it as a service provided by private minters. These minters would guarantee the weight and fineness of a coin, stamping their own brand on it, competing for customers just like any other business.
So it's all about reputation and trust, just like with any other product or service, right?
Yeah.
You choose a minter based on their track record, their accuracy, their reliability.
Exactly, and that competition would keep them honest. Just like you trust your local butcher to sell you an accurate pound of beef, you'd have confidence in the quality of the coins produced by these competing minters.
But then there's this whole idea of the price of money, which, most people think of as a single number.
Right, but it's more nuanced than that. What we perceive as the price of money is actually an array of exchange ratios for all the goods on the market, right? It's the purchasing power of the monetary unit.
So instead of saying money costs X, it's more like 1 ounce of gold can get you this much bread or that much labor or a fraction of a car. It's all relative values, right? Constantly shifting based on supply and demand for all those goods and services in the economy.
You've got it.
Okay.
And this brings us to another important concept that Rothbard tackles, the fear of hoarding.
Ah, yes. The idea that if people hold on to money instead of spending it, the economy will grind to a halt.
Right. But Rothbard challenges that fear. He argues that hoarding can actually provide a valuable service, especially during times of uncertainty.
Now, that's an interesting take. How does hoarding, which we often associate with greed or fear, actually benefit the economy?
Well, think about it. In a world where we know exactly what the future holds, there'd be no need to hold cash, right? You would just lend out all your gold and get it back exactly when you needed it. But real life is full of surprises. It's full of uncertainty. We need to be prepared for those unexpected events.
So holding cash or gold in this context gives us flexibility, right? It gives us the ability to adapt.
Exactly. It acts as a buffer against, those unforeseen events. And here's where it gets even more interesting. If government intervention increases uncertainty, wouldn't it actually incentivize people to hoard more?
That's a really interesting point. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more the government tries to control and manipulate the economy, the more people might feel the need to hold on to their savings, which further undermines the government's efforts. It's a fascinating dynamic.
It certainly is. It raises questions about the unintended consequences, right, of government intervention. But to really understand the intricacies of that intervention, we need to delve into the darker side of this story, the history of governments meddling with money. That's where things start to get really interesting.
Buckle up, everyone. We're about to embark on a journey through the twists and turns of monetary history. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive, where we explore the rise of government monopolies, the insidious practice of debasement, and the emergence of something called fractional reserve banking.
Don't miss it.
Welcome back, everyone. So far, we've explored how money emerged in a free market, a system where people chose gold and silver, based on their unique qualities and usefulness for trade.
Right. A remarkable testament to the market. You know how a complex system like money can evolve without any central planner, calling the shots.
Absolutely. But now we're shifting gears a bit to a less harmonious chapter, the story of money.
Yeah.
The history of government intervention. It's like it's a classic tale of temptation, unintended consequences.
Yeah. Throughout history, you see governments have faced a fundamental challenge, how to acquire the resources they need to fund their operations.
Right. Businesses earn revenue, by selling goods and services, but governments, well, they rely on taxation.
And taxation, as we know, has never been particularly popular. I mean, throughout history, it's led to revolts, revolutions, all sorts of social unrest.
Makes sense. So governments have always been on the lookout for more subtle, less obvious ways to get their hands on resources.
Exactly. And as money emerged as this powerful tool for facilitating exchange, it also presented a tempting, new avenue for governments to expand their reach, expand their influence.
So this seemingly brilliant solution to the problems of barter, money itself, became a new target for government control.
Precisely. And this is where Rothbard's analysis gets really insightful. He argues that the history of government intervention in money is essentially a history of what he calls counterfeiting, the creation of new money out of thin air.
Counterfeiting, that's a bit strong, isn't it? I mean, governments are supposed to be the guardians of our currency, right? Not the ones debasing it.
Well, that's the perception they try to cultivate. But when you look at the historical record, it becomes clear that that governments have often been the biggest culprits when it comes to manipulating the money supply for their own benefit.
But how can creating new money be harmful? I mean, is it more money a good thing? More spending, more economic activity, right?
Well, that's the allure, the illusion of prosperity that that inflation initially creates. Think about it. When the government injects new money into the economy, it's like a temporary sugar rush, right? People feel richer, they spend more, businesses see their sales go up.
So it's all smiles and sunshine at first.
For a while, yeah. But the problem is that new money isn't backed by any real value. It's simply diluting the purchasing power of the existing money, causing prices to rise.
I see where you're going with this. So that prosperity is actually an illusion. People might feel wealthier in the short term, but their money is buying less and less as prices rise. It's like running on a treadmill, right? You're putting in a lot of effort, but you're not actually getting anywhere.
It's a subtle but insidious form of taxation. Governments are, in effect, taking resources from their citizens without their explicit consent.
So inflation is like a stealth tax. It flies under the radar, making people feel better off while actually eroding their wealth.
Right. Yeah, and this process can unfold in different ways, right? At first, people might notice prices creeping up and think it's just a temporary blip. They might even postpone purchases, waiting for things to go back to normal.
Right, but then they realize prices aren't going back down; they're accelerating upward, and that's when the panic sets in.
Precisely. People start buying, anything and everything just to get rid of their money before it loses even more value. Demand for money plummets, supply skyrockets, and you have hyperinflation, a complete collapse of the currency.
We've seen this play out in tragic ways, right? Germany in the 1920s, Venezuela more recently, Zimbabwe. It's a terrifying prospect.
It is. It's a stark reminder, of the dangers of unchecked inflation and the devastating consequences it can have on, individuals, families, entire societies. And governments, with their power to print money at will, are often the primary drivers of this destructive cycle.
Okay, so governments have this inherent incentive to meddle with money. But let's trace the specific steps they've taken to gain this level of control. Where did it all begin?
Well, Rothbard argues that it started with something seemingly innocuous, the establishment of a government monopoly over the minting of coins.
So instead of having private minters competing in the market, ensuring quality and honesty through that competition, the government says, we're the only game in town now. I'm sensing this isn't going to end well.
You're catching on. It was, it was all presented as a way to protect the integrity of the currency, to prevent fraud, ensure standardization. But in reality, it was the first step in consolidating government power over the monetary system.
Because now the government gets to decide, what denominations to produce, how many coins to mint. They can even charge a hefty markup, a seigniorage, as Rothbard calls it, for tuning your gold into coins.
It's a hidden tax, essentially, a way for the government to profit from the very act of creating money.
And it gets worse, right? Yeah. Remember how Rothbard emphasized that money is fundamentally a commodity, something tangible, something measured in weight.
Yes. But governments were very keen on shifting the focus away from weight and towards the name of the currency: dollars, francs, marks, pesos.
So instead of thinking, this coin contains 1/10 of an ounce of gold, people started thinking, this is $1, and the government says it's worth this much. It's a subtle but important distinction, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's all about detaching the currency from its tangible commodity base, making it easier for governments to manipulate, to control.
And that brings us to one of the most insidious practices in monetary history, debasement.
Yeah. Debasement was, in essence, a sneaky way for governments to increase the money supply without actually producing more gold or silver.
Yeah.
They would melt down existing coins, add some, base metal to the mix, and then reissue the coins with the same face value, but with less actual precious metal content.
Well, and so they were literally reducing the value of the currency while pretending it was still the same. It's like watering down the wine and telling everyone it's the same vintage.
It was a deceptive practice that allowed governments to enrich themselves at the expense of their citizens.
Do you have any specific examples of this? Because right now it just sounds like a theoretical possibility.
Well, history is full of examples. Take the dinar in Spain. After the Christian reconquest, the new rulers dramatically reduced the dinar's silver content. The result: rampant inflation and economic instability.
It's amazing how these historical patterns keep repeating themselves.
It is. It's a testament to the timeless nature of these economic principles. Now, this debasement often led to a phenomenon known as Gresham's law, where bad money drives out good.
So the debased coins, even though they're worth less in terms of their precious metal content, would end up circulating more widely, because they're legally mandated to have the same face value.
Exactly. People would hoard or export the good coins, the ones with the full weight of gold or silver, and you'd be left with with the debased currency circulating in the economy. It's a classic example of how government intervention, even with seemingly good intentions, can backfire and create unintended consequences.
And this brings us to another attempt by governments to fix the monetary system by metalism, the idea of having both gold and silver circulating, at a fixed ratio. It sounds logical. Why not have two precious metals backing the currency?
Well, the problem with bimetallism is that no government can accurately predict or control the market values of gold and silver.
So it's back to that fundamental truth that that money, even precious metals, is subject to the laws of supply and demand.
Precisely. Those values, they fluctuate constantly based on market forces. If the government sets a fixed ratio that differs from the market ratio, you're bound to have problems.
Gresham's law strikes again.
Exactly. Whichever metal is overvalued by the government will flood the market, while the undervalued metal will be it'll be hoarded or exported.
Right.
It creates constant instability, uncertainty.
Right. So instead of simplifying the system, they actually made it more complex, more unstable.
They did.
But all of this, debasement, bimetallism, it almost pales in comparison to the real game changer, the rise of fractional reserve banking. Now, this is where things get really interesting and to be honest, a little mind-bending. Can you break down how fractional reserve banking works and why it's so significant in this story of government control over money?
Yeah. It all starts innocently enough, right, with the concept of a gold warehouse. A bank where people deposit their gold for safekeeping. The bank issues receipts which represent ownership of that deposited gold.
So it's like a code check for your gold, right? You hand
Yep.
it over, get a receipt, and you know that you can reclaim it whenever you want.
Precisely. And those receipts could be traded as a substitute for the actual gold, making transactions more convenient. And as long as every receipt was backed by an equivalent amount of gold in the vault, this system, it's called a 100% reserve system, worked perfectly well.
But I'm guessing there's a but coming here.
Yeah. The trouble started when banks realized that they could issue more receipts than they actually had gold in their vaults.
Wait, hold on. They were issuing receipts promising gold that didn't actually exist. Isn't that essentially fraud?
It's certainly a breach of contract. And Rothbard, being a staunch defender of property rights, he calls it out for what it is, a license for theft. This practice is what's known as fractional reserve banking, right? Because only a fraction of the outstanding receipts are actually backed by gold.
So they're creating money out of thin air.
Yeah.
But how does this tie into the story of government control?
That's where things get really interesting. Government saw in fractional reserve banking a golden opportunity to further expand their control over the monetary system and to fuel their inflationary desires. By granting banks certain privileges, they created an environment where banks could inflate with impunity, knowing they had a government sanctioned safety net if things went south.
Okay, we're definitely stepping into some murky territory here. Can you give us some specific examples of these government privileges and how they enabled this inflationary system?
Sure. One of the key privileges was the suspension of specie payments. Specie simply means gold or silver coin, the actual commodity money. So suspending specie payments meant that banks were legally allowed to refuse to redeem their receipts for gold.
So they could issue receipts promising gold, but they didn't actually have to give you the gold if you asked for it. Isn't that a recipe for disaster?
It certainly creates a dangerous situation, and this practice became increasingly common, especially in the U.S. during the 19th century. Every time there was a financial panic, states would allow banks to suspend specie payments.
So it became a recurring pattern. Banks could inflate the money supply,
Yeah.
knowing they had a government-sanctioned escape hatch
Mhm.
if things went wrong. It's like giving someone a credit card with no limit and telling them they don't have to pay it back if they get in trouble.
Yeah, it's a recipe for moral hazard, and it's a pattern we see repeated, throughout history. But as problematic as fractional reserve banking is, it actually laid the groundwork for something even more powerful, more centralized central banking, and that's a story for part 3 of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, listeners. We're about to enter the lair of the ultimate monetary beast. Welcome back to our deep dive. So we've journeyed from the bustling marketplaces of barter to the gleaming allure of gold and silver.
We've seen how money emerges organically, right, in a free market.
Yeah.
Driven by the choices of individuals, seeking the most efficient way to exchange goods and services.
Right. But then we took a bit of a detour, didn't we, into the shadowy realm of government intervention,
We did.
and saw how the temptation to manipulate money has led to some pretty disastrous consequences.
From debasement to bimetallism, the historical record is littered with cautionary tales.
Yeah, and just when we thought things couldn't get any more complicated, we stumbled into the labyrinthine world of fractional reserve banking.
Where banks, with the blessing of governments, started creating money out of thin air.
Right, and that brings us to, I guess, the final boss of our monetary adventure, central banking.
Often shrouded in mystery, presented as this all-seeing, all-knowing guardian of our financial system.
Right, but what if this supposed guardian is actually the puppet master, pulling the strings behind the scenes to further its own agenda? That's the question that Rothbard forces us to confront.
It is.
He argues that central banking is the culmination of everything we've discussed so far, right? Taking government control of money to a whole new level.
A whole new level, yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to unravel this mystery. Let's start with the basics. How do these central banks, actually exert their influence? How do they become the puppet masters?
Well, one of the key mechanisms is their monopoly on note issue. In most countries with central banks, private banks are no longer allowed to issue their own notes.
So all those crisp bills we carry around, those aren't liabilities of individual banks.
No, they're liabilities of the central bank, and since the central bank is, for all practical purposes, an arm of the government, these notes take on a special significance.
Because the government, accepts them for tax payments, declares them legal tender, and that gives them this, this air of legitimacy, stability.
Exactly. It encourages people to use them. It makes them feel more confident in the currency. But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This isn't just about creating money. It's about controlling how that money flows through the system.
Right.
As private banks are prohibited from issuing their own notes, they're forced to become clients of the central bank.
So they have to go to the central bank to get those notes. If their customers want to withdraw cash.
Exactly. This makes the central bank the banker's bank, sitting at the top of the monetary pyramid.
Right.
And since it holds the reserves of all the other banks, it can exert enormous influence over the entire financial system. Think of it this way: the central bank is like the conductor of an orchestra. Setting the tempo, controlling the dynamics, and ultimately shaping the overall performance.
Right. But what if the conductor is tone deaf?
Right.
What if they're more interested in playing their own tune than in creating harmonious music? That's the danger that Rothbard warns us about.
It is. It is.
He argues that this centralized power gives central banks this unprecedented ability to manipulate the money supply, leading to the very problems they're supposed to prevent: inflation, financial instability, and economic crises.
Exactly.
So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more power we give central banks to control the system, the more unstable, crisis-prone that system becomes.
It's a classic case of the cure being worse than the disease. And this brings us to one of the most contentious aspects of central banking: their role as the lender of last resort.
Right. The idea that if a bank is facing a run, the central bank can swoop in with emergency loans and save the day.
Right. But Rothbard argues that this supposed safety net actually creates a moral hazard.
Because banks, knowing they have the central bank to bail them out, are more likely to take excessive risks.
Exactly. They're essentially playing with with house money, knowing they won't bear the full consequences of their actions.
Right. And this lender of last resort function often ends up fueling even more inflation.
Yeah.
The central bank pumps new money into the system to prop up failing banks, further increasing the money supply.
It's a vicious cycle, and
Yes.
it's a pattern we've seen play out time and again, throughout history. But surely there must be some limits to this to the central bank power, right? I mean, they can't just print money endlessly.
Well, in a world where currencies were still linked to gold, there was at least the constraint of foreign redemption. If one country inflated too much, its citizens could redeem their currency for gold, which would drain the central bank's reserves.
Right. That provided at least some check on runaway inflation.
Right.
But as governments became more and more addicted to inflation, they found ways to circumvent this gold constraint.
Right. They formed agreements to inflate together. They devalued their currencies, and eventually they just abandoned gold altogether.
And that's how we ended up in the world of fiat money that we have today. Currencies backed by nothing but government decree and the increasingly tenuous faith of the people using them.
It's a precarious situation, to say the least. So where do we go from here? What does Rothbard propose as a solution?
Well, he advocates for a return to a truly free market in money, a system based on a commodity standard, ideally gold, and without the manipulations of central banks.
A radical proposition, I know, but as this deep dive has shown, the history of government intervention in money is a story of hubris, of unintended consequences, and of recurring crises.
It's a sobering reminder that even the most well-intentioned efforts to control and manipulate complex systems can often lead to disastrous outcomes.
So what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they do to navigate this complex and often treacherous financial landscape?
Well, the key is to be informed, to understand the history and the principles that underpin sound money. Don't blindly trust the pronouncements of central bankers and government officials.
Right. They may present themselves as the as the wise and benevolent stewards of our economy, but as Rothbard has shown, they often have their own agendas, which might not align with the best interests of ordinary citizens.
Right. It's about recognizing that money is not just a piece of paper or a number on a screen. It's a tool, a vital part of a complex system that should serve us, not control us.
And perhaps the most important lesson of all is that that true economic stability and prosperity they come not from government control, but from the freedom of individuals to choose what works best for them, to engage in voluntary exchange, to build a system based on on sound money and individual responsibility.
That's the essence of Rothbard's message, and it's a message that resonates deeply in our current economic climate. This deep dive has provided us with valuable insights into the nature of money, the dangers of government intervention, and the potential for a freer, more prosperous future.
Absolutely, it's a lot to ponder,
Yeah.
And we encourage you to continue exploring these ideas, perhaps by diving into Rothbard's book, "What Has Government Done to Our Money?"
There's always more to learn, and as this deep dive has shown, understanding the history and nature of money is essential for for anyone who wants to navigate our increasingly complex economic world.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.